Okay, so we'll get started. Last week, even though the internet doesn't know, and John, I don't know if you know, but we went through the entire set of grave mode things. So we'll briefly touch on them again, but we won't go through all of them since we've already.
Well, you did them all on Saturday, so.
Yeah, we sang them all on Saturday as well.
The music, the notes.
Yeah. So we'll read through a little bit of it.
I'm not sure if I've got them.
That's right. I'm giving it.
Oh.
Right here. Give them out last week. There you are.
And you started last week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this week,
About the varis.
we're going to start something very new, which is we're going to skip over the Brief Tone 2 and Plagal 2 and go straight to slow with Plagal 4. And so we'll talk about that. So we're turning over a new leaf here.
Before there's specials to Hira, I don't think I've ever done Tone 2. And Tone 2 is a little odd. It is a little odd.
That was at first when I was singing it, I was kind of like, wait a minute. I was like, they're not singing this right. And I was like, we've never done Tone 2. And yeah, I guess you guys have never actually sung. Yeah. So yeah, the all the theophany stuff is all Tone 2. We got a little bit of Tone 8 in there. So.
Yeah.
So here's Plagal 4, and we'll talk about a little bit of the differences there. But
No, this is the first, third complete sets.
so that one completes the Plagal 4 set, hopefully, because you should have the brief versions. So, but before we do that, we'll go through the grave mode since we only briefly talked about it. We mostly just sang it last week. So, the grave mode. We said last week that which is technically Tone 7, but all the Greek books say grave mode. So it would be Plagal 3, except that it gets its own distinction, because we always have, 1 Plagal 1, 2 Plagal 2, 3 grave mode. It doesn't follow the Plagal version. So technically it's Plagal, but it gets the distinction grave primarily because the long version and I'm not sure whether it's the original version, it all started from Zo, and that's the low Zo, down below ni. And so because it's the lowest one, it's like the heaviest one, it's the weightiest one, so it gets this grave, this seriousness, this like weightiness. So it's at the base of our scale, since some of them start at Ke, some start at Ga, some start at Bu, some start at Pa, some start at Ni, and then grave goes to Zo. The one that we're singing in general instead starts at Ga, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But this one is in the Diatonic Scale, and it has a really ominous sound to it. It's not like any of our Western scales at all. And it's kind of, I don't know, that's also part of why it's called grave, is because there's this somberness, there's this heaviness to it. But that's difficult, and that's way far in the future, and I'm just going to erase it. So the grave mode that we're talking about that starts at Ga is in general in the Harmonic Scale, which is as close, it is a Western scale in general, but I'll say why it isn't in a second. It kind of dabbles between enharmonic and diatonic, I guess, a little bit, but the other ones that we've done so far have been mostly diatonic. Tone 3 kind of pushed into enharmonic a little bit. Grave mode is primarily enharmonic. And the key here is if you go to our scale chart, if we start at Ga, and then we make our little blocks here, 12, 12, 6. This is pretty much what you need to be concerned with, is that from Ga to V is 12, from V to Ke is 12, and from Ke to Zo is 6. And then to distinguish this, a lot of times in the music and in our scale chart, what they do is they put this little symbol, this little circle with a hook on it, next to Zo. You can put it on other notes as well. But
What does that tell you?
6, 12, 12.
Oh.
Beneath this symbol, wherever the symbol is placed,
okay.
the interval beneath it is going to be 6, 12, 12.
I see, okay.
Just going down. So if you see it in another piece of music, it's 6, 12, 12. In this case, they put it oftentimes in the beginning, your tone marker, which tells you how to start the piece,
Mhm.
and that tells you, okay, this entire thing is going to be 6, 12, 12. So because this interval, or this set of intervals of 6, 12, 12 is so important, what they did is that they composed an entire scale off of 6, 12, 12. So it's essentially 12, 12, 6, and then that takes you up to Ga. And then this is Ni. And then from Ga going up, it is 12, 12, 6, and that takes you to Zo. And then from Zo above, you go to 12, 12, 6. Now, everything that we talked about before, if you remember, was 12, 10, 8, 12, which is kind of our separator. 12, 10, 8, right? So this is different in that all we have is 12, 12, 6, 12, 12, 6, 12, 12, 6, repeating over and over ad nauseum. So this kind of changes our concept of a scale. In Western music, you always have 8 notes that comprises your scale.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, you kind of have 8 notes. Sometimes the Byzantine scales, however, don't go by 8 notes. They go by 5 notes, or they go by 4 notes, or they can go by 6 or 7 as well. So there's terms for this, and then what you have is essentially tetraphonic, saying 4 notes, or pentaphonic, or heptaphonic, or septaphonic, or octaphonic, which is your final, everything based on a system of 8. And this would be your more Western concept. This grave mode and harmonic is tetraphonic, because we go from Ni to Ga, and then we could just transfer this right up here, because it's the same intervals, acts exactly the same way. So this is tetrophonically based. And none of this really matters, because mostly we're just going to sing it and you won't even think about it. But this is just to keep in the back of your mind that we're pushing outside of the realm of Western music now. Because we're kind of redefining what a scale is. So the interesting thing that I find, let's say if we start on Ni, if we go Ni, Pa, Vu, Ga, then we start again. Ga, Li, Ke, Zo, Zo, Ni, Pa, Vu. That Vu is not the same Vu that's down here. Because Ni, Pa, Vu, Vu was this Vu up here. So an octave away is not really an octave away anymore. And so your Vu is different, your Zo is different. Some are the same, but a lot of the notes are not repetitive when you go up 8 notes from them, or 7 notes from them. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm not confusing. I don't know, John, is it?
Well, so, I mean, when you get to it.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have to sing it.
Yeah. So, in general, this all seems slightly complicated, but the fact is that 12, 12, 6 we're very comfortable with because it's all Western intervals. And so normally we will ignore this top portion and we'll pretty much go from Ga to Zo and from Ga to the lower Ni. So we kind of don't have to worry about any of the peculiarities of the tone. And just to kind of finish up on the grave mode, at least this version, we're doing here the Immorologic, the Brief, or Brief. And the key here is that we start on Ga, and then from there, what distinguishes it from tone 3 is that it goes to the And so, na na ga zo zo ke li vi. It kind of hits there, and that's one of its resting places. Li li ga vu fa vu ga li, and it keeps staying there. And essentially, it keeps going back to the until you finally go back to ga. And this would be, so this is your initial starting point. This is your tentative ending. When you haven't really reached a full sentence, and then this is your imperfect or your perfect ending that we were talking about before. So this would end the piece, and this would also be when you've reached a complete statement. This is where you would hit. For nuancing, every so often, instead of the or maybe instead of ga, it'll go down to ni, or it might go down to pa. But these are kind of like if you're saying da 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 da, then he descended into earth, or something. Somehow just descending to earth, somehow forward painting, or Hades would go to pa, or something like that. So, in general, ni and pa are kind of slightly used. The and ga are your primary notes that function here. Whereas in tone 3, what we saw for tone 3 was, do you remember what it was there? We start on ga, and then we go to.
Me? No.
Nope, we go to K.
K. Oh, K.
Yeah. Ga ga di ke ke zo ni zo ke. And then you go down to pa and you do all sorts of other stuff. But this is what distinguishes tone 3 from tone 7. Because tone 3 has pa and ni, tone 7 has pa and ni, but the real distinct feature is that it's not ke, it's the. So, I think that's
The apikima for that.
the apikima. You could go na na from ni to ga,
Okay.
but that's
Ni
what
ga.
that's what tone 3 is. And so
Yeah, that's
sometimes
what I was thinking of ni.
sometimes you hear
That's why it came to me. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's the apikima
That's
3.
So
So what is okay? This
So,
is different. That's
sometimes you can do it like that for tone 7, and sometimes it's easier because, let's say, I'm trying to pitch something. If I do ni ga, that lets me know where I am. But the one at least that like St. Anthony's Monastery has online, and a lot of people do, is ga ga, which would you just say it on na. So na na, and that's your ga, right there. But if you're just starting a piece that way, it's kind of like, well, I hope I picked a good ga. Because I could go na na, because it feels good, and then I forget. Oh right, I gotta go to zo, and the knee's gonna be kind of high, and so.
So we use the same one as 3.
I used both of them on Saturday. So the first one that I did, because I knew kind of where I was, I just did na na, and that was our ga. But then later on, we weren't all over the place, but we weren't in the right realm for tone 7. So I was like na na, and I picked a different note for it. So, but na na on just straight ga is kind of the way to go. Is that?
Na na na.
Na na is tone 3, kind of tone 7, but then tone 7 grave mode is na na, just kind of floating around ga. And then if anyone has that scale chart, if you go there, let me bring it up on here. It's that rightmost in the rightmost column in the scales section, where it says scale of the grave and harmonic mode from ga, and that's where you have 1206, 1206, 1206. And then the one thing, sometimes it's not consistent, but the little markers underneath the note names change as well. So if you look at ni from the enharmonic mode there, and you go on the left-hand side to the diatonic scale, ni doesn't have the same bottom anymore.
What does that mean?
Because
pa is the same as ni.
Yeah.
Everything's like down.
Because no, it's not all down.
Oh no, you're right. Because okay.
It's
I'm
not
confused now.
It's not consistent. So I'm not exactly sure on this. I'm gonna say something, and it's because this is how I've understood it and how it's helped me so far. This may or may not be correct, but what I believe those little bottom portions mean is the local environment of that note. So like the local environment around ni. So any note that has that same bottom will have the same environment as ni. So if you look, let's say,
environment meaning like a note above and below.
Yeah, exactly. Like it kind of feels the same locally. So if you look at pa, for example, in the diatonic scale, below it is 12,
right.
Above it is 10. The only other one that has that is ke. and it has the little Q.
Okay.
And so that also has a 12 below and a 10 above.
Okay.
So we know it has the same local environment. The only difference there is that it has 2 dots, right?
Oh yeah. Okay.
And that 2 dots means go up 4 notes. So it's up 4 notes from whatever the other one is.
Say that again. Up 4 notes from what?
From Pa, from the last version of it.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the one? Oh, okay. There's dots here. Okay, so this is.
So, and I believe that's what that means. So if you're on Pa,
okay.
Ni has the same thing, because Ni is just like Thee. Except in this case, it's kind of weird, because there's 12 and 12, that's why I didn't mention Ni. But we'll just ignore Ni for the moment. But Ni to Thee, they have the same kind of local environment, depending upon how you treat it.
With local within that scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but then if you go to, let's say, your Harmonic Scale,
Okay.
okay, so Thee, if you go to Thee has the 2 dots, but it also has the 12 and 12 around it.
Mm-hmm.
Pa has the same bottom, and it also has 12, 12. Now in this case, it's only up 3, so I have to figure out what those 2 dots mean. I thought it meant up 4. I'm wondering how they're using them here. Even though I drew up this thing, but I was copying it off of a Greek model. But at least the way that it was described to me, those 2 dots is up. It's up 4 notes from. It's like the Plagal, up 4 notes from the previous note. But we'll just ignore the dots for the moment, and we'll just say that bottom symbol kind of represents that local environment. And that at least throughout most of these scales, that it's repetitive that way. So that let's say if you hit Pa somewhere, and you see a certain symbol underneath it, you kind of know, 1, you know what scale you're in, but 2, you know how the scale is going to behave around the note where you are. So, if that makes any sense.
It's good to know, but it's not essential. Right
Not essential. No.
Can't see making use of that while I'm like I'm citing something.
that-
Whoa, wait, everything here. They've got this.
Yeah,
recess
like,
of
whoa,
my life is-
yeah.
I can't be
2
bothered
dots
by
now.
everything. I can't be bothered by everything.
Yeah. No, the only time that it comes in handy is when you're singing the glory for the Mother of God on her remission, the glory both now, because it goes in all 8 tones.
All right.
But your Pa doesn't always act like Pa. Sometimes it's acting like another note in the scale because you're switching tones all the time. So what they do, Pa is still Pa in the global sense, but they change that bottom symbol. So now your Pa is acting like a different note. So they change that bottom symbol so you know, okay, this is actually Pa, this is Pa, technically, but it's acting like Vu, or it's acting like Ni, it's acting like another note, it's not itself. But, again, non-essential. So, what is essential is that we'll sing a little bit of grave mode, and maybe we'll sing the Lord I have cried, let my prayer, and then do the first verse and first Sakura, and then we'll skip over to Plagal 4. So, cool with that? All right. So, Lord I have cried. Yep. Let me bring it up here on my screen. So, says our God, starting on the note name. Zo ke di ke ga di gavu avu ga di ga di ke di ga vu ga di ke zo ni zo ke di ke ga di ke zo ke di vu ga vu pa vu ni pa vu ga vu ga di vu ga di ke ga di ke di ga vu ga. Yeah, it was that other page, John. Yeah. So, and now if you look at the top of the page, on the top at Lord I have cried, it says Ichos varis. Varis just mean grave. And then it has a little symbol there, and then it says Ga with our little circle with our swoopy guy underneath him.
Why does a happy guy there?
That's your
sad.
enharmonic.
Oh, diatonic is sad guy.
Oh, the diatonic, well, for Ga.
No, I'm not.
What? Yeah, but yes, that's your little swoopy guy. Okay. Let's do Let My Prayer, and then we'll sing it with the words. Ga vo ga li vo ga li vo ga li ga vo pa ni pa vo ga ga vi ke vi ga vo pa vo ga vi vi ke zo vi ke vi vi ga vi ke vi ga vo ga. And Jeff and I were talking last week that
Oh, that's right.
the ending, because you have a 6 and then that symbol at the end on "Oh Lord," you have your little sharp, which means you're kind of cutting it in half, or depending upon what school of thought you're coming from, you're either cutting it in half or at least making it smaller. So you either have an interval, instead of 6, you have an interval of 4 or 3. Both of them are rather small, and I think it's 2 is just barely perceptible by the human ear and barely executable by the human voice. So it's almost imperceptibly different. So, oh Lord, which is probably too much. But we were listening to George Hatsakronoglu online, where he sings it, and at least my eyebrows raised up for the first time. I was kind of like, did he change notes? I don't think he did change notes. And I think that was that your same?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like he changed his notes. So, yeah.
So, okay, that's not the timing. It's so much as the how much.
Me, oh Lord, we're grossly exaggerating it, probably.
Me, oh Lord.
They could almost sound like the same note.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing he did, it really did sound like the same.
Yeah, and I think it's only after listening lots and lots and lots of times, eventually it kind of you start to hear the difference, but it's very slight. But we'll do it however we can do it at the moment, given the frailty of human flesh and our vocal folds.
Looks like it goes do do do.
Yeah, it's very small, very small. So, okay, let's sing Lord I've Cried and Not My Prayer with the words, straight through. Na na, Lord, I have cried unto Thee, hearken unto me, hearken unto me, O Lord. Lord, I have cried unto Thee, hearken unto me, attend to the voice of my supplication, when I cry unto Thee, hearken unto me, O Lord. Keep going. Let my prayer be set forth as incense before Thee, the lifting up of my hands as an evening sacrifice. Hearken unto me, O Lord. And
the flat sign over evening, or is that my mistake?
That's the enharmonic sign.
Oh, the enharmonic.
Yeah. Because we kind of restarted, because we finished one hymn and then you restart, and there was no real reason to put it, I guess. I don't know why it's there. And sometimes there's little helper symbols just to remind you that it's gonna be the flat, but I don't know.
Oh, that way up ahead. That's way up ahead.
So, okay, let's go to the Brief Stikira. Verse number 1 is Stikira number 1. And we'll sing them on the note names, and then we'll move on to a new tone, or to a rehashing of a tone, but it's the slower version. So, bring my soul Bring my soul out of prison, that I may confess thy name. Vigaga vugadi vugadi vikedi vikegadi vigadi vikediga vikezorkedi gavupavugadi gadi kezorkedi gadi kedigavuga. Cool.
The only thing is, what if all zo is supposed to be sung the same in this tone, right? So why do they have one diacritical over one and not over the other? I was just curious.
I do not know.
Because it leads you to think one should be sounding different.
Right.
Just
my background does not lead me to answer that.
no.
I'll try and, because most of the time I guess my background is all practical. It's kind of like this is how it sounds, and then eventually learn the theory behind it.
Well, that's more practical.
And most of the time when I've talked to teachers, their answers are somewhat ambiguous or vague. And so I'll have to ask the one, I haven't asked the guy in DC yet, because sometimes his lessons, like, the questions that I wanted to ask were not the questions that anyone else wanted to ask, because they were like, what does that note mean? As opposed to, why is this symbol here in this context? Like this.
Yes.
So,
how's that going, by the way? Is that?
Oh, we haven't had anything.
Oh, okay.
I
don't want to be on record.
I know. Yeah. We haven't had anything yet for the new year. I'm waiting for him to respond, or to send out an email saying for new stuff. But but I think the questions that you're asking right now is exactly the question that's in my mind. Is why is it there and not anywhere else? Or why didn't they just put it at the beginning? Or if the initial tone marker that we saw in the beginning had it on it, why did we need it at all? Yeah. And sometimes you do have, in modern music, a lot of times they put helper symbols just to remind you about something. And it's not necessary to be there, and in fact, there's no reason that you should need to write it, because you should know the scale, and therefore you should know how to, and you should know kind of the oral tradition. So sometimes they're there just in modern music. You wouldn't have found it in a manuscript either 100 years ago, let alone 400 or 500 years ago. Not that the music would even be written the same way.
Right.
No, it was different.
Yeah, similar, but
different.
More complicated, yeah.
Much more complicated.
Okay, so I think that's good for grave mode, since we already went through all of them.
Okay.
And it's kind of I think it's the same thing over and over again. That's what
Pretty much,
you kind of saw.
We're not going to go down to pa.
Yeah, except for the one time when it went down to pa, that kind of took us off.
I don't feel it now.
Well, what we did was we did sight reading essentially. We just
flew through everything.
We just read through them with not the note names. We just read through it on words just to see how it went. And I think we did like 3 of them on.
A couple. We did a couple.
But yeah, we just went right through them, almost like a Vespers service. Okay, so moving on.
Well, see, this is new too, because I've never done any of this slow stuff.
Exactly. So this is gonna. I'm curious as to how you guys are gonna think about this, just because it's a lot more rhythm and it's a lot more slow.
And it's a lot more gorgons.
Yeah, a lot more gorgons. And sometimes you get the 3 gorgons in there.
Yeah, I know. That's just like, oh my god.
Yeah. So
half plus a half, and this is already a half. So
we've already gone through Plagal of Fourth before, but we've gone through the brief version, which is the Harmonic version. What we're doing now is called the slow version, or your Chromatic. And this is because it's used for Stikura. Not that the Harmonic are not used, but they're the brief versions of it. These are kind of your more characteristic for resurrectional stuff. So Chromatic, what it means, Harmonic was essentially maybe 1 to 3 notes per syllable. So that's why it was, come let us rejoice in the Lord. It's 1 1 1 1 1 2 3 1 1 done. It's very jumpy, and it has 1 note or 2 notes or 3 notes per syllable. Chromatic has mostly, I would say, probably 3 to 5 per syllable, which is kind of what makes it Sicararic. You do have your bridges where it's 1 or 2 notes per syllable, and you do have your kind of connecting phrases where you can't put 3 notes on every syllable. So it varies, but in general, the defining characteristic is the fact that a lot of the notes have a lot of the syllables have a lot of notes now. So 3 to 5. If you get more than 5, you're getting into the long hymns, your papatic melodies. So that's your kind of defining characteristic of this. You have a lot more of your gorgons, your 3 gorgons. I don't think Plagal 4 normally has too many. D, 3, quadrigorgons. I don't know what that one's called. Or your gorgon, D gorgon, and 3 gorgon, sorry. So it has a lot more of those. We have a lot of these symbol combinations which have, let's say, something like this. We have a lot of these. So, da. That's just, you kind of flutter right in the middle of this. We have a lot more of those. And a lot more symbol combos that we'll come to recognize and come to love.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing before we begin reading is that it's again diatonic, as we've seen before, 12, 10, 8, 12, 12, 10, 8. But it starts on Mi. And then, just like the brief version, this is one of them that doesn't really change too much. It hits V and it hits Vu as your intermediate notes. And then eventually, it goes back to Mi. So this is your starting point. This is your intermediate portions, kind of your tentative endings. You could have a, I guess like an imperfect ending there where you finish the sentence. You could finish there, but in general, you always go back to Mi. Mi is very dominant in this, and this one does use what we've talked about tetrachords before, sets of 4 notes, or tetrachord being. Yeah. So your first tetrachord is Mi Pa Vu Ga. Your second tetrachord is Vi Ke Zo Ni. So what we saw was that this Vi Ke Zo Ni wasn't used a lot during the brief version because it was like what's the? I have to think about what the words are. But dun 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 da 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 da. It didn't really use this. It kind of hit it, but very slightly. This one will go Ni Pa Vu Pa Va Ni Pa Vu 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 Ga Vi Vi Ke Zo Ni Zo Ke Zo Ke Zo Ni Zo Ke Vi. It really can stay there and kind of use that upper tetrachord, this upper set of 4 notes, a lot. So you see a lot of mixing and matching depending upon word painting and depending upon how the phrase is going to go. So it doesn't just stay down here anymore and just touch on this. We're going to use this a good bit. So this is where having a more expansive range begins to be helpful. So let's see. I have to think about what is the first. Maybe it's an evening hymn. An evening hymn and rational adoration. Maybe next week, because we won't get through too much this week. Maybe we'll do the brief versions compared to the slow versions, do one, and then sing the next one just to show the difference.
Okay.
Now we'll just focus on the reading. And let's see, I think that's pretty much it. We'll hit a few things in Lord I Cried and Let My Prayer that we'll need to discuss. And if you look on the second page of the Plagal of Fourth Mode, you have your verses of the psalm. Mm-hmm. They're always written here in, I guess, the diatonic ones, because the diatonic versions of the tones, the brief and the slow are kind of similar, so you can have the same verses. These are very quick. We might read through them tonight, but I'd rather do other things. But these are very quick, and you would do them for either the brief or the slow versions. But in general, because for Lord I Have Cried in general, you should be doing the slow version to start with. They put them there because that's where you need them. And we'll see when that changes.
Let's back up. They put what, where, what?
So all these verses of the Psalms.
Yeah.
So if you go.
When they've got it. The way they put it, the way they compiled it.
Yeah. Because if you notice, like on Saturday when we were doing the grave mode, after Lord I Have Cried, it went straight to the Gura. We had none of the verses.
Right.
So that's why we had to flip back to the slow version to get the verses. And that's because, at least in the modern tradition, I think more ancient tradition too, Lord I Have Cried was done slow. And then the Apostica could be done slow, but most of the time it was done fast. So Lord I Have Cried, the place where you needed the verses was in the slow version.
Okay.
So to do the brief version is kind of like, I don't know, if you're doing a really small, like let's say you have a few people together and it's a pretty small Vespers, it's kind of like, why do we have to extend it for, an hour? Let's just do it 45 minutes. So, but these, said, O Lord, a watch before my mouth and a door of enclosure round about my lips. Very fast. Whereas, Lord, I have cried unto thee. It's a little slower paced. All right, so let's read through.
Let me peek in my head.
So before we had Neagia was our Plagal of Fourth, our tone 80.
Right.
You can use that too. Just Nipavu Nini Neagia. You can use that here too, but in general, they extended it a little bit to let people know this is the slow version. So Neagia. Or if you're switching tones and gonna sing a glory, you might hear it. Or you could go longer and longer. Like if you're doing a true Bicam, you go again longer. But those are the two ones that would be used for Plagal 4. The first one is adequate. I don't think you need to do the extensively long one. So,
okay.
All right. Does that satisfy
Yes,
your?
I'm just gonna have to remember. I'm trying to sort them out because that turns you into what they're gonna.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing that once people do get used to them, so that people in the congregation, when you go everyone kind of jumps in because they're like, oh, I know tone 8, I know Plagal 4. They get really excited.
That's good. That's the only way you'll know sometimes.
Yeah. So at least at the churches I've been at, where they're receptive to Byzantine chant, they're very excited about Plagal 4. So let's read it on the note names. Slow. Do you want to look at it first, or?
Yeah. What's this under cried? What's that symbol? Up.
Where? Cried? Oh, that's a combo symbol.
Yeah.
Up 4, followed by your Kandimata, your unstressed up 1.
Followed by. Okay,
Yeah.
I would have read it exactly the opposite.
Oh, wait, would you have read it as just
Up
1?
and up 4.
Ah. Okay. So
you're saying it's up 4 and up 1. I guess that sort of makes more sense musically, but.
So it's this guy, right?
So you read that first, and then you read the Kandimata.
Yeah. So because
why do I know that?
It's read bottom up.
Oh, that's right.
So
okay.
This equals.
So you hit that first.
Yeah. So this one, and you see this. Sometimes you see really interesting combinations.
Yeah, I've read a couple of it.
Oh.
So it's that one followed by that one.
Okay.
Okay. But then they put them on top, and again, as you notice with a lot of these, especially when the CP stone is underneath it, that little swoopy guy, the slur, or the you go down after it. So they put them on top of each other, and then you go down following it.
Oh, yeah.
So, Cool. Anything else? You can take a look at it. We'll only go up to the third line for the moment, and then I'll say something.
So at the end of this third line, there's a lot of movement onto the O.
Yep.
So you got 3 minutes and a half. Because these hormones are just all sort of like.
They're piled on top of each other.
Yeah.
They're just feeding right into one another.
Right. So there's a bunch of basically 8 notes in a row.
Yeah. This is reading ahead.
Right.
Par excellence.
And there's some Batagor hormones in the back. Or at least one. The dot after means what? That gets the second one gets the 2/3, right? So third and 2/3.
Let's see. So that's on
Supplication.
supplication. So this is this one. Yeah, technically, if the dot's on the second one, if the dot's on the right hand side, the
Right
second one is longer.
Right.
In this case, that's just a symbol combo. So let's see. Attend to the voice of my song. That's just plication.
Okay. Oh, on the first page, you have, I have cried unto thee. Again, that what is it? It's a sign of emphasis under the
The psiphistone?
psiphistone. Is that no?
Wait, one where?
No, is it a psiphistone? Oh no, the one that's sort of
Which one?
inverse comma. Yeah. With the dot.
Oh, that one. Okay.
I figure I can't remember that now.
Is that the anti-cannibal?
Which one?
Anti-canning. Okay. And how is that supposed to be done?
So I just making sure that this guy
Right.
with the dot.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to
So
remember how
that one is a very characteristic thing right there, with the two apostrophos with your anti-canum underneath it. So that one, so Lord, I have cried unto thee. So on that right there. It's just like a little flutter in that case.
Oh, okay. But it's not a sign of timing or anything. It's just the
Well, the dot is a sign of time. The other one just
okay,
says.
so that's the point. Okay.
Then you're gonna flutter that note.
So that's the time is used in the flutter or something.
Yep. Unto thee. And there's a lot of. There's a lot of
The little flutter at the end isn't there? You're just you're throwing it in because it's slow and you got time to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
To thee.
You were doing some of that. Saturday with those tone 2 things. Where's that coming from?
Oh, okay.
So so I'll read the first line of this.
And that's underneath to thee is a psiphistone. Is that right? Making these wrong? Or not?
Where?
You have the anticanum. No, these the sign of quality, I guess.
Where are you? Which
to thee, underneath to thee.
which one? The third line?
Yeah, or syndesmo. I can't remember what that is.
Oh, that the syndesmos.
It's a syndesmo, but now how would that be? It's simply flowing. It doesn't necessarily indicate anything about how you have to emphasize the voice.
If you were awesomely skilled, which I am not, it might mean something, but in this case,
I don't know. Yeah, that's what I don't.
It just means that it's all connected.
That's what I figured. Okay.
And that they're flowing together. So, in this case, yeah, I wouldn't execute it any differently. But let's say at the beginning, the Lord, I have cried unto thee. So it's to thee, but that's kind of boring. So then you end up getting
not yet. It's not
to thee. You know, and then there's all these little things. The one that's let's see, the one that I like the best is the third line of the second page. When I cry. So it's just, yeah, it's just this little cry, which you could do cry. Well, no, you can't do it like that because you got the gorgons there. So cry. So when I cry, so you have 3 notes like ni 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 ni, but that's kind of boring. Ni ni. So that's kind of a fun one. So there's a lot of these little things in here that are we'll learn. So, but you don't have to get it immediately. Just hopefully
himself to exegesis.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully I will execute it in a certain way that will be consistent and the same. Sometimes like the cry at the beginning, I might do that different ways, but I'll try and be consistent.
All right.
I can't guarantee it.
Eventually we'll
I'll do
pick
it
it
the
up.
same way. Yeah. So, okay.
Decide how you want to do it, because that's the way we'll be doing it. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let us read it slowly, simply, straight and to the point. I'm not gonna read into anything. I'm just gonna read the rhythm as it is. Hopefully, because it's getting complicated. So, ni, starting at the beginning. Pa vu pa ni ni li ke di ga vu ga li ga ga li li ga vu ga li ke li ga ga vu We'll stop there for a second. How was that?
Oh yes, that's indicating something.
Yeah, exactly. So how was that so far? Okay?
Yeah.
Hopefully it wasn't taking your brain for a loop. The only thing I think besides the rhythm is Lord, at the end right there, Lord, I have cried on. We have that change of.
Oh, flat and zo coming back.
Yeah. Cried on, which we all did, but just pointing it out. And this one, because Plagal 4 slow holds in that upper tetrachord a lot, you end up having to concern yourself with, is zo flat, is it not flat?
Right, yeah.
Is K sharp, is K not sharp? Because sometimes is
I remember that.
Ni ke zo ni zo ke zo ke zo ni zo, then it becomes flat. It's not going to be written. It's not going to be written. So, because that would get really complicated.
Sure.
So, but well, eventually it'll become second nature. Eventually. Okay, so at the end of the third line, hearken, we have a scale change, right? Above our the, we have a little symbol which tells us to go to the soft chromatic scale. So that will be the in the soft chromatic scale, and our soft chromatic scale is 8-14-8, 12-8-14-8. So what you need to concern yourself with here is that we have the, and you have the, ke, it's slightly flat, so the, ke, the. And then the gavu is the same as we've been doing, but you're the kezol keli is a different interval than what we've been singing before. So what we have.
Hearken is on ke, right, or ke flat, as it were.
Yes, ke, yes.
Oh, so that's why it's important to know that, because otherwise it would be a natural.
Right.
Ke,
so
or 12.
The instead of hearken, which a lot of times, at least when I was in Pittsburgh, for the sake of simplicity, we sang it not flat, because a lot of our singers, either they weren't used to these scales, or they were we wouldn't all sing it the same, so we just kind of sang it, we all decided something. But it's the hearken unto me.
And then it's back to
and then it switches back. Yeah, that's your little symbol that tells you that the is going to be the in the diatonic scale. And if you notice, the little bottom portion of the there is different. Right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's because the there is your soft chromatic the.
Right.
So if you go to the scale chart, let me bring up my scale chart. Above the is 8, below it is 12, which is not the same as 12-12. It's now 8-12. So you have to give a new bottom to it.
Yeah, except you just turn that off, right?
Yeah. So you're turning it off. But what those symbols tell you is...
Seems like they'd be telling you now you got you're back to the diatonic V.
Well, those symbols tell you where you are, not where you should be.
That's like where you were?
Or where you were. Yeah. Or where
I don't even know that anymore. I'm not there.
Well, if you get on the wrong note, then it's important.
Okay, yeah.
So this tells you where you should have been, and tells you what scale you should have been singing in.
Get it wrong, man.
And then normally it would tell you how to continue, but in this case we change it because we have our little modifier there, your phthora, which tells you to change from your soft chromatic scale, your soft chromatic V, where we were, to now diatonic V, which is where we started.
Yeah, and that's you can full advantage of the fact you're singing the slower scale changes and like all kind of weird rhythm stuff.
So this is really.
There wasn't much of this going on in like those.
No,
because you don't have time to like.
Exactly. There's no time to either think about it
right.
and it's
or even to influence. Like, you're past it already.
Yeah, exactly.
You have time to like make it hard chromatic and change it.
So this is where word painting comes in a lot. And if you notice, it's on Hearken Unto Me. Sure, the Greek has it on Hearken Unto Me as well. But in this case, it's kind of like, Lord, I've cried unto thee, hearken unto me. Lord, I've cried unto thee. We say it a second time. Or actually, this is the third time we've said hearken unto me. This is we kind of nuance it, because it's kind of like, it's getting kind of...
Oh, I was going to say, so what's the point of like doing that here?
So, that's
you don't have the same thing three times
like, Lord, I've cried unto thee, hearken unto me, O Lord. Lord, I've cried unto thee, hearken unto me. Come on.
I'll sing it in a different...
So it's like...
Use a different scale.
So it kind of twists it.
It's plaintive. It's plaintive.
Yeah. So this is kind of like, if you, like, kind of twisting it a little bit. It's kind of like, come on. So this is where a lot of nuance comes in. Same thing happens in Let My Prayer, so I won't go over it there. We'll just kind of sing through it. The convenient part here is that normally we might have to change the note name there when we're singing it paralegi. In this case, at the third line of Lord I've Cried. You know how sometimes we've changed the note name so that instead of singing thee, we now sing a different note. Here, thee is thee. It's just a different scale. So we don't actually change the note names, we change the intervals between them. So,
all right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So...
It's not someone who's like the zeros or whatever,
the
shadings or whatever.
Yeah, the shadings.
Is that actually like a translation of what they're called?
Of Zigos?
No, of shadings. Like, is that...
I think that was a friend of mine, Richard Barrett. He was the one, he knows Greek, I think fluently, or at least fairly fluently. So he was the one that was helping me kind of translate these things.
Some of the jams.
And he knows music, he knows Western music enough that that like we both kind of spoke the same language, where if you look at some things where they translate it, they translate it like literally, which to a Western musician gives you nothing.
It means nothing. Yeah.
So we kind of, when we said modulants, you're modulating to a new scale. When we said shadings, you're not really, you're changing the scale, but it's not a full scale. You're nuancing it. So you're more shading the melody.
Okay, so translate it so in some sense it would have what meaning to it, like Western musical terms.
Yeah, and so it might, I'm not sure whether that's actually what the Greek word there would have meant.
Well, the Greek word for is kriya. It's K-H. Have you heard that?
Okay.
K-H-R-O-I.
Okay, yeah.
That's shading.
That's what that's what the word is then.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so shading or nuance then.
Right.
So we picked shadings instead of nuances.
That means shading or nuance, right? It's the same thing in English.
Yeah, pretty much. Unless you think, like, some people when they hear shadings, they might think like a tree shading something, but
no.
This is music, so we are. But yoke and tilt and saber there.
Zygos is yoke.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah, it's the yoke for the oxen.
Yeah, and Cleton, I think, is also kind of tilt. Like it kind of puts thing on its side.
It means to bend or to...
What does it mean? To bend?
Clean. Something like, the Cleton.
Yeah. Cleton. And then the spathi is something... Stab or
means sword. The old word for sword.
Okay, so saber, yeah. It's
or
an
saber.
Older word for,
yes, right.
Older word for a sword.
Saber is a better word.
So, but then while we're here on this, does anyone have the scale chart?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at the bottom is where we're in section, the modulant section, and B, the chromatic family. We're just looking at the soft chromatic, those variants, and those are the two that we're kind of concerning ourselves with here. You have the one for nivu or the or zo, and then you have the one for paga, ke or ni. So in general, mostly you're going to use the first one, the circle with that anti-canema through it or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But yes, that's the one we're dealing with here. So back to the melody. Let's see.
Where are we picking this up?
The third line.
Oh no, where we left off? Okay.
Yeah, third line, Lord I Cried.
Oh, okay.
Oh, from Hearken?
No, from there.
Oh, I see.
So so we're gonna start at the beginning of the line at Lord. So we start on what note is that, Jeff? Yeah, okay. So ni ke ni ke zo ke ni ga ga bu ga ni ga di di ke ni ga bu ga ni ke di ga di ke di. Back to diatonic. Di ke di ga bu ga bu pa ni pa bu ga di bu ga ga bu ga bu pa ni ni. Should we do that again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Of my supplication. So we'll start at supplication. Sa di vu ga ga vu ga vu pa ni ni. Cool. Does that make sense, or should we do it again?
Yeah, one more time, please.
Okay.
Return to charm.
Vi vu ga ga vu ga vu pa ni ni. And that's the difficulty when we're actually when you take the rhythms and try and kind of expand them, the tempo gets really slow. So you're like mi pa ni ni.
Yeah, this is also slow. Yeah, but the good thing is this is formulaic.
Oh yeah.
So this repeats it. So
all the time.
Da.
Yeah, eventually you don't even have to look at it.
Look at the whole phrase and say, I know what that is.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much. I was talking to one of my friends that's a linguist, and he was like, "This is so complicated." And I was like, "No, it's a language." I was like, "You just have to." First you learn the letters, then you learn the words, and then you learn the phrases, and then eventually you're not really reading, you're not listening to letters anymore. You're reading the entire phrase, so that you can kind of skip over a lot of it because you kind of know how it works, which is essentially, I mean, you can't do that with Western music. I think I can say that because you just this has formulaic phrases, this has pattern recognition, there's all sorts of stuff. In Western music, there's none of that. Because it's just not. It just isn't there. So that's one of the things where when I've talked to some people that are Western musicians, myself included, I had to convince myself of this, that one of the advantages of the notation is that eventually, once you get used to it enough, you're reading new pieces of music and new complicated things, and you can just skip over entire phrases because you're like, oh, I know that.
Yeah.
And there's got to be new things, of course, but
I think there's less so because I think the Byzantine music is programmatic. Programmatic, which means
it's predictable.
It's written for the words. It's not the other way around.
Exactly.
And so the words are set too. Set in meaning and formulas that repeat itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that's why
because we only have our words only go a certain number of ways. It's like the stress patterns.
Up or down.
Yeah. So yeah. So let's start when I cry unto thee at the end of the second line.
Okay.
So that's our ni thee ni ni ni. ke zo ni 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 zo ke vi ga ga gu gu ga pa ha gu ga gu gu pa ni ni. Cool.
And
Any questions there in that last three lines?
the what wondering how is that sine qua la fron is a harken, or is that da 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 da? I'm not sure how. See, I was confused.
On harken on the second line.
Yeah. On the third line.
Yeah.
On the second page.
So
just
unto thee heart.
Or is it
Ni ni zo ke vi. Yes, it's sine qua la fron. You're joining
so
on that front.
where's the short note? I'm confused now.
Oh,
do 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 do. No.
Ni ni zo ke vi. Zo and K are fast.
He's okay. It's okay.
Yep. Ni ni zo ke vi. Because the two knees at the top are fast as well. So ni ni zo ke vi.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I'm thinking the knees as being one note.
Right.
They're also half, not half, which is quarter, eighth notes.
Yeah, eighth notes. Yeah, we're cutting them in half.
Yeah,
they're eighth notes.
No, that's what threw me off.
I get confused between all my Western terminology.
This is another place where I would not sing hearken, right? Where I take it out. I probably would, if I was reading this through, I'd probably take thee all the way down to the word thee all the way down to thee.
Yeah. So.
Just because it seems unnatural, like to leave it and then start this new. I don't know, just something about the way that that happens all the time, where they'll go down the scale and then at the last note in the scale sort of, or the
yeah,
that's right.
Not the scale, but that descending group of notes is like a new word or something.
Yeah,
it just seems unnatural to me. It always catches me.
This is where like it kind of connects the phrase. It's up to the composer as to how you want to do this, but you couldn't go the. There has to be something there. If your sentence has one more syllable, that's convenient. Mm-hmm. In this case, Papa Frem, he took the advantage and said there should be a syllable there that's stressed, but I'm going to connect it to the next phrase and put the next word there to kind of bridge them together.
I would almost want to pause before I went into said hearken. I mean,
the heart.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Those sound funny.
Yeah, you could. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You could if you want to. No, this is where I think our Western background is telling us one thing.
Yeah.
And I think if you talk to someone who was used to Byzantine music, they wouldn't have any problem with this because they grew up with it or they had been singing it since their youth. So this is natural. This is normal. In Western music, we don't like to do that. And that's where I think it's up in the choir. There's something. Oh, it's the Great Doxology, Holy God. If you remember the long Holy God at the end of the Great Doxology that we sing, there's something is whited out and it's rewritten. It's rewritten incorrectly.
Oh, really?
It's rewritten correct for a Western mind, but it breaks the Byzantine rules.
I'll have to look.
I'll point it out.
Point that out to me.
But it's funny because every time I sing it, that's not what I want to do because we're singing Byzantine music, and my inclination, because I turn off my Western brain, or I can't turn it off, but I'm in Byzantine mode. To sing that is actually difficult because that's not how it works. That's not how you would sing it in Byzantine music. And I have to think what it's. I have to look at what it is.
Yeah,
I can't even think of what it, because it's wrong to me. And so, but I've seen that a lot in Western music where a lot of people, they're writing Byzantine music and they're breaking rules all over the place because they want it to sound correct to their Western mind. Which I agree, but it's not Western music.
Yeah.
So, shall we sing the entire thing? With the words?
Yeah, slowly.
And then we'll sing it a little faster.
It's supposed to be slowly anyways, right?
Yeah, but we'll sing it way.
I mean, I don't know what. Well, maybe we could after that sing it.
So the speed, I would say the real speed should be Lord, I have cried unto thee. Hearken unto me. Hearken unto. You know, that type of, kind of a, it's not a walking pace. It's a little slower than walking pace. I guess you could, it's more of a militaristic march, like when you have a lot of people and you're, it's not your, so I can see people walking like through, I don't know why I want to say Moscow, but I can see people walking through like,
Sounds like Moscow.
You know, it's got this, not heaviness to it, but it's that kind of weightiness. But we'll sing it a little slower.
Okay.
And you could do it faster, but then at some point it's getting kind of pushy in terms of the speed. So, 1, 2, Lord, I have cried unto thee. Hearken unto me. Hearken unto me, O Lord. Okay, 1 second. There, just to let you know, the O Lord, sometimes people go, oh, there's a little flutter there. Or, especially I've heard in a lot of the Arab type singers, some of the Greek singers too, they go, oh, Lord. It's kind of like, da 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 da.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of this whole bounce, as opposed to just a simple da.
I've heard that a lot. I mean, it's almost like you just naturally do that.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting on that note for a while.
They do a flutter at the end.
Something.
Right.
You
heard that?
Oh, Lord.
Right.
There's a-
Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
That flutter, I mean.
Yeah.
Is that normal? That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's not that, and we'll see. There's a few times when it isn't that, but in this case it is. And then you also have the oh Lord. There's a little other flutter that I can't do, but it doesn't really matter for the moment. Third line. Lord, I have cried unto thee. Hearken unto me. Attend to the voice of my supplication. Do that again? Or is it okay?
Yeah, because I was sort of with you and I ended up in the same place, so I'm not sure I was doing exactly the same thing.
So,
With your foot, it's a supplic.
yep.
Or could you just
There
it is. Because of the body up?
Yeah.
Because
We
of the
better,
body
yeah,
up.
yeah.
That's why. Okay. Do.
Let's do it one more time. Okay, so then it eventually becomes placation. When, oh yeah, I guess we can keep going. Is everyone fine with that?
Yeah, I'm good, yeah.
When I cry apologize. I got excited. So the one thing there on you could do it. You could sharp K there. When I cry unto. I don't particularly like to sharp it. I think it sounds kind of weird. Some people do. I guess you could do it. Unto thee. Sometimes that K right there. Unto thee. Sometimes I'll sharp it right in there. But it kind of depends. I don't care. You don't have to sharp it there. But let's sing that again slowly. When I cry. And I fluttered on unto again in the middle there. Unto. My voice wants to do something else. So unto thee. But let's do it a little slower. When I a lot of times at the end, at least a lot of the singers, they'll break off between O and Lord. Oh, Lord. Just so that you can actually, you're not at the end of your breath capacity. You have the opportunity to hold it out a little bit. And at the end of the penultimate line, the hearken unto, there's another flutter in there. Unto, sometimes you could sing it unto, it's kind of square.
I mean, that's
unto. Sometimes you'll see it written in Western music, or sometimes you'll hear people sing unto. I don't particularly like that, or it's not my favorite. So unto, it's acceptable. There's no problem with that. But I like unto. Unto. It's kind of, because we have that E song there, so you're
kind of giving a little emphasis.
You're re-articulating the E song.
Re-articulating, I like that.
Yeah. So I think that's more. It's more faithful to the music, not necessarily more correct than unto. I just think it says, like, the music has an E on there, so I'd rather do unto. Okay, let's read it through a little faster, and then we'll be done because we're over time. So, may I give from the beginning. Lord, I have cried unto thee. Hearken unto me. Hearken unto me. When I cry thee, hearken unto me, O Lord. Cool. I imagine that was probably fast.
It wasn't too bad, except that when I cry unto thee, like when I cry unto thee, that was still
Yeah.
kind of muddy.
Yeah. What's
It
that?
took a while to get there.
Eventually,
There was 3 different versions of that.
when I used to read through, I started off with something really long. When I don't know why I did this, but I started off with a really long piece, and I was reading through all the rhythms. And at some point, I would look at it, and I'd go to sing it. And I was like, no, this doesn't make any sense. And I'd go through the rhythms, and I was like, no, that makes all sense.
Uh-huh.
And I'd sing it, and for some reason, like as I was singing it, I couldn't read it quick enough
Right.
at the right tempo
Yeah.
to have it make sense. So I kept having to convince myself that no, you're singing it correctly.
Mhm.
It's just you can't read it that fast.
Yeah.
And so like this. When I cry unto thee, hearken. You know, now I'm fine. I can read that, and I'm like, oh, of course it means that. But then I was like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. So, and the only thing I'll add, and then we'll finish. Then we're done. Third line on the first page. The way I sang it this time was, Lord, I have cried. That's not the part that I'm. You can do cried or the cried, same way that we've been discussing before. But on Lord, I did Lord, I. Sometimes you can do Lord, I, like Lord, I,
Mhm.
or I think those are the 2 major ones. Lord, I, just a very simple, or the extra flutter. Lord, I.
Yeah.
Either one is fine. This time I happened to do it, and as I was doing it, I was like, oh man, I wanted to do the other thing. In my mind, I was like, oh, you missed the cool one. So,
And you had time to do it.
yeah. So,
Okay.
this is Plagal Fourth mode, slow version.
Alright.
I think that's probably, hopefully we'll be able to go through them more quickly.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, we'd be taking huge amounts of time to go through it. But we'll kind of go as you guys feel comfortable. If we're going too fast, let me know.
Yeah.
If you think we can push it a little bit and go faster.
Well, we'll see. I mean, initially it might take slower, but I mean, after a while we're going to get used to.
Yeah.
This is just like there's just more on the page than
Yeah.
there's been. So.
Exactly. So I think you'll get used to the formulas. I
Yeah.
think you'll get used to the rhythms and seeing them and them becoming your friends. So, cool. Thank you.